Thank you very much, Dr. Pachauri. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening. I know that many of you are not only here, but are also here giving support to TERI and to the Light a Billion Lives campaign. And certainly that is the reason I'm here. There's really only one reason I'm here. Rajendra Pachauri is my friend. When he asked me for help, I'm going to help. And the greatest honor of my life was when I had the privilege of standing next to him as he represented the global scientific community working on climate change when we were together in Oslo. And even before that, as he has said, we had the opportunity to work together. I have always appreciated your work, Dr. Pachauri, and I think of the families, the men and women and children who benefit from these solar lanterns. I think of the project in the global context, the black carbon or soot that results from burning biomass and the traditional cooking fuels is now, according to some scientists, even larger than methane as a source of global warming pollution. And of course, the indoor air pollution that creates respiratory diseases and many other health problems. It's almost impossible for any reasonable person not to understand in a very short period of time why this is not a wonderful visionary project. So when you call me and ask me to help, of course, I am going to be here. And it is a privilege to be able to share this dais with Ambassador Rao. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for being a great steward of the relationship between the two largest democracies in the world. We have a little ways to go before we get into India's class, but we share our commitment to democracy. And incidentally, I think it's a fitting occasion. I don't know all the political implications of saying such a thing, but I think it's a fitting occasion to celebrate a blow in favor of democracy in Pakistan. This is a wonderful event. There's much we don't know, but we do know that for the first time since partition, for the first time in the history of Pakistan, a democratic election, whatever its shortcomings, has resulted in the peaceful transfer of power from one elected civilian government to another. So both India and the U.S. can feel some joy and take some pride in the hope that democracy, which ebbs and flows in successive waves but continues to march forward, we believe it's the destiny of humankind. And so we meet here at a day when that destiny is refreshed. To Ministers Abdullah and Raju, Dr. Farooq Abdullah and Dr. Mangapati Palam Raju, thank you. It's an honor to be with the two of you on the dais. Thank you both for your inspiring words. And Sam Petroda, thank you for being here and joining us and adding your perspective with the expertise that you have. And Eric, thank you for being our Master of Ceremonies. And I can tell, for a short time early in my career, I was a journalist. I didn't attain the heights that you have reached, but I was in the profession long enough to know and respect journalists who open their hearts to the full experience of what they're covering. And when you were talking about your encounter with India, I understood what you felt, and thank you for the commitment that you have made. India is, of course, an absolutely crucial player in solving this crisis that we face. And I've spoken so often and for so long about this crisis, I hardly know what words to use that will sound fresh in your ears and that might have some prospect of inspiring some extra commitment in your hearts because this group, among all groups, because you've come with Dr. Pachauri's invitation and in his support, I know you are already there. But I sometimes think of the poet who wrote that we are in a dream and that soon we shall awaken. We are now 7 billion people. We have quadrupled our numbers in less than 100 turns of our planet around the sun. We will add another billion people in the next 13 years and another billion in 14 years after that. And perhaps another billion after that, we don't know. But the affluence of the people on our planet, which we celebrate, is also growing. And it's rather astonishing that in only 12 years, which is not that long, we will double the number of human beings in the middle class globally. And within 5 years after that, we will go from 2 billion today to 5 billion. So we'll add 3 billion people to the global middle class in only 17 years. And so the absolute numbers with the consumption patterns that we know from experience and history go with this increasing affluence, multiplied by the energy sources that we've come to be so dependent on. 85% of Earth Inc. now is powered by carbon-based fuels. And only a little over 150 years ago, the first oil well was drilled and coal was already in use, but in the last century and a half, and particularly in the last half century, and even more particularly in the last few decades, with the rise of the emerging economies, we have seen an orgy of global warming pollution. We put another 90 million tons into the very thin shell of atmosphere surrounding our planet every 24 hours. It's an astonishing amount. And the cumulative man-made global warming pollution that we have left there, according to the distinguished climate scientist Jim Hansen and his colleagues, now traps enough extra energy to equal the amount of heat energy released by 400,000 Hiroshima-scale atomic bombs going off every 24 hours. It's a big planet on which we live, but that is a lot of energy. And it's having very destructive consequences. When will we awake from this dream? When? It's, again, pointless to pause for dramatic effect in an audience that is already convinced. But again, I try, and you never know who will hear. But my own part in this, if I may be personal for a moment, Pachi, if I may call you the nickname that I first knew you by before you entered the halls of Valhalla. My own role in this is almost accidental. I was a college student who was majoring in one subject and walked into a class in a different course of study. And the distinguished scientist teaching this class, Professor Roger Revelle, was an amazing teacher. And many of you here have had the experience that I've had in finding a teacher who opened your hearts and opened your minds and showed you what really felt so powerfully to be the truth. This was such a man for me. And believing as I did in democracy and in the efficacy of self-government and the wisdom of crowds and our ability as human beings when we communicate freely and test one another's ideas and then reason together, I had no doubt whatsoever that if this great scientist was correct, as I believed he was, that my people, my leaders, my country, and my world would, of course, respond and deal with it quickly. Didn't happen. 7 years after that personal experience of enlightenment, it took a full semester, but it deeply affected me. 7 years later, I was elected to the U.S. Congress, the U.S. House of Representatives, and I immediately, in getting my committee assignments and deciding what I was going to do, I decided, I must check in on this. What's going on? How are they, what kind of progress are they making in solving this? I'm interested. I learned about it 7 years ago. What's going on? Nothing. 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 What's going on today? The answer is not really very different. Some great changes have occurred. At the grassroots level, leaders like Dr. Pachauri have organized fantastic initiatives like the Light a Billion Lives campaign, and there are so many other. There are an estimated 2 million NGOs in this world now working on climate or related issues. Many businesses, I see some of them represented here, by the way. Thank you. Thank you. Businesses that care, and some intelligently look at the impact on their brand, but most, I know from knowing the individuals involved, really care. They want to do something about it. But our governments are failing us. I don't speak critically of India. I do speak critically of my own government, but of governments generally. And our markets are failing us. We have two very powerful tools with which we can shape the future of our world. One is democracy, and the other is capitalism. I don't wish to debate the rearguard arguments about capitalism versus other systems. The world has decided. And there are different forms of capitalism. But capitalism is recognized as the basis of every successful economy in the world for very well understood reasons. It unlocks a higher fraction of the human potential with a ubiquitous set of organic incentives that reward hard work and ingenuity and innovation and initiative. It balances supply and demand. It allocates resources. It's more congruent with higher levels of political, economic, and spiritual freedom. It's very powerful. And like democracy, it draws on the wisdom of crowds. And in the marketplace, the wisdom of crowds is often synonymous with the invisible hand. The other of these tools, democracy, draws upon the wisdom of crowds in the political sphere. And when we as human beings are at our best when we are attending to the integrity of our institutions and when we are focused on the deepest values that we share, we are capable of amazing good things. I grew up as a boy, a big part of my life in the American South. I remember when the civil rights movement turned a corner. I remember when the conversation on civil rights was won. I remember when a friend of mine, I was young, made a racist comment, and another friend of mine in my group said, "Shut up. We don't talk that way anymore." And there were millions of conversations in my country that went exactly like that, and the laws began to change. 3 months ago now, in my country, here, two gay men were waiting in a long line for pizza, holding hands, and a hateful homophobe walked by them and made a nasty, insulting comment. And everyone else in the line turned and said, "Don't talk like that. We do not accept that anymore." We change. When questions become defined as a choice between what is clearly right and what is clearly wrong, then the timer starts ticking. And soon thereafter, the alarm goes off inside the conscience of millions. And they say, "Oh, that's that choice between right and wrong. I think we should do what's right." And that's what happened in civil rights. It's what is happening with gay rights. It is what happened with apartheid. It is what happened with abolition. It is what happened with anti-colonialism. It is what happened with independence. It is what happened with democracy. And yet now here we are on this vast planet, all of us, and the challenge is almost too big to be resolved down to a simple question of what is right and what is wrong. But it is a choice between what is right and what is wrong. We're destroying the future. On Wall Street a few years ago, many of the U.S. banks, not only the U.S. banks, but mainly the U.S. banks, engaged in immoral activity, unethical activity, selling something called subprime mortgages. And I won't belabor the issue, but it was a question of right and wrong. They gave 7.5 million people mortgages, even though the people involved couldn't possibly make the monthly payments on the mortgages. But it fed the profits of the banks, and so there was a temptation to believe it was okay. When the credit markets blew up and there was a global run on the banks, the Great Recession followed, and there were investigations. And the reason I'm telling you this story is that I was surprised when they found emails between the brokers and traders and bankers, and they used an expression I had never seen before. I have children and grandchildren who I'm sophisticated enough to know what LOL means, laugh out loud. Do you know what LQTM means? Pachi? I'm so hip. Laughing quietly to myself. What does IBG-YBG mean? I didn't know, but it was used by the bankers going back and forth. IBG-YBG. It means I'll be gone, you'll be gone. I'll be gone, you'll be gone. Is that the position we're taking on global warming? Just asking. I'm sorry to get passionate. I know, as I said before, it's kind of pointless to get all wound up with a group who's already committed on this. But what are we going to do? Democracy has been failing us because democracy has been hacked. You know what hacked means? It's a computer term, where the operating system of a computer is taken over remotely by malicious actors who make it serve purposes other than those for which it was designed. American democracy has been hacked. No reform can be adopted if it runs counter to the economic interests of a major lobby. I love my country. I'm proud of my country. What has happened to our democracy is pathetic. And you need to know. I speak not of India. We subsidize coal, you subsidize kerosene. Both of us should stop this madness and insanity. You're welcome. Capitalism has been hacked. 60% of the trades in New York and London are in milliseconds. Quarterly reports drive decision-making. The flows of capital in these exotic derivative instruments, some of which are indistinguishable from gambling, are now 40 times larger than all of the global transactions in real goods and services. And some of it has value, but most of it does not. And the measures we use for what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, what represents progress in the economy and what doesn't, are deeply flawed. We don't count the depletion of groundwater, which in many parts of India is at a crisis stage. In many parts of the American Midwest and Southwest is at a crisis stage, and it is not measured, it is not calculated. And the God of growth is a false God because the definition of growth is utterly insane. It excludes the depreciation of groundwater, it excludes the depreciation of topsoil, which in both India and the United States is reaching a critical condition. Every kilogram of corn grown in the American Midwest results in the movement of a kilogram of topsoil down the Mississippi River into the Gulf of Mexico. It's insane. Our measurement of growth, which is our proxy for progress, does not measure the distribution of income. In India and in the United States, inequality is growing rapidly. In my country, 93% of the additional national income since our recovery has gone to the wealthiest 1%. That's not an Occupy Wall Street slogan, that's a fact. And it doesn't measure pollution. We use the atmosphere as an open sewer. Those 90 million tons a day, 20% of it each day will still be there 10,000 years from now. And we don't even include it in the calculations. We say to every industry, every business, every factory farm, see the sky? It's yours to use as a sewer. Be our guest. Destroy the future. IBG, YBG. I feel as if, before I close, I should apologize for expressing anger. As always, when anger is expressed, it's partly directed at oneself. I wish I knew how to bring about the change that we need. I wish I knew. I have tried. I'm not done yet. I have no illusions that any small group of us will be able to do it. It will take most of us. But I pray, I believe in prayer, and I pray that God will give me a way to join with others who also know that we need to find the way. Much is at stake. We're dreaming. Time to wake up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your insight and passion on this topic, which is we heard about a little bit before. We are over time a little bit, but I think it would be remiss if we didn't get a couple of questions in, and I'll ask Mr. Vice President, the first one for you. You talked about businesses that care and about how our markets have failed us. I want to read sentences from two Bloomberg News stories that ran in the last week. One of them is about investment in India. The largest overseas bet on Indian consumers is from companies like Nestle, Colgate-Palmolive, and others who will pursue more deals in a nation where household income is forecast to triple this decade. The other article was a 3,700-word profile of you. And it said, in talking about generation investment management, including in the roster of publicly traded companies are Amazon, eBay, Procter & Gamble, Colgate-Palmolive. Colgate-Palmolive is in both of those lists. And we're here tonight to mark a philanthropic event. But it seems like the motivations for philanthropy are creeping into these companies, the businesses that care. So in your investment approach, which has now been documented, if you have any comments on the article as well, I'd be happy to hear those. But how does that happen? Like, how do markets, when they function properly, when investment is functioning properly, how does that change reach the people we're trying to help here tonight?
I believe in what my partners and I refer to as sustainable capitalism. I co-founded Generation Investment Management almost 10 years ago with David Blood, who was the CEO of Goldman Sachs Asset Management. I wanted to name the company Blood and Gore. I really did, but the other, I thought it sounded like an old English marmalade company, but the other partners wouldn't go for it. But we decided to build a brand new model that would fully integrate sustainability into the mainstream investment process. We invest mainly in global equities. We also have a climate solutions fund. We have a China fund. We're launching a credit fund. But our main business is global equities. And we built a team to look at the traditional metrics of what makes for a profitable investment target or business. But then we supplemented that team with a group of sustainability experts, all of whom went back to school to get their certified financial analyst ratings. We spent a full year developing our vocabulary and methodology and approach. Then we spent another full year investing our own money before we took others. And then for the last 8, almost 9 years, we have invested money from pension funds, high net worth individuals, et cetera. And knock on wood, we have done extremely well. Most investment models look at numbers, and the quarterly reports and the other numbers that come over the Bloomberg screens. Well, you probably know what comes over my screen. I'm sorry. That was a really cheap shot. That was not funny at all. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. It was a joke. But the numbers that come over the Bloomberg screens, by and large, are focused on short-term economic performance. Let me give you an example. We were invested in British Petroleum, or BP, when we started. Lord Brown was an advocate of sustainability, had done a good job. They made some major acquisitions in the U.S., and we began to see some problems. There was a refinery fire in Texas. There was a pipeline accident in Alaska. And our team, it's not just, it's a unified team now, said, what's going on? And we looked at the safety culture and found that it had not been pushed into the American acquisitions. So we got out of BP before the Deepwater Horizon. Now, there were a lot of investors who looked at the traditional economic metrics, and they were taken completely by unpleasant surprise when the Deepwater Horizon knocked all that value off of their stock. And I'm not patting ourselves on the back. I'm just saying that if you take sustainability factors into account, you are going to do a better job for your investors. And companies that care about their employees, that care about the communities where they operate, that care about the environment, that have ethics manifested in the executive suites over time are going to do better. We compensate ourselves on a long-term basis, 3 years, which is not really long-term, but compared to quarterly or annually, it's longer term. We believe in the alignment of incentives. We look for agent-principal conflicts. Let me finish with just one brief analogy. When all of us were in school, we learned about the electromagnetic spectrum. Bear with me. A long rectangle, usually, with a narrow band of visible light near the middle. And the radio waves and gamma rays and ultraviolet, all that stuff. But the amount that we could see with our eyes is just a very tiny portion of the whole. For the 8 years I worked in the White House, I started every morning with a long briefing with the CIA that collected information from all parts of that spectrum, trust me. And the picture was much more complete. Now here's the analogy. If you look at the value being created by companies or in an economy, we focus normally on a very narrow slice, but the rest of it is still there. And if you take all those sustainability factors into account, you can get a fuller and more realistic image. And that's what we try to do. And I think that's what our economy should be trying to do. Pension funds, the pension fund trustees have an obligation to match the performance of their assets over the long term, because that's when their liabilities mature. But then they turn over the management of their assets to financial managers who they pay on a quarterly basis or an annual basis. I've only been in the business world for a little more than 12 years. One of the things I've learned is that often people will do what you pay them to do. And if you pay them to maximize their results on a short-term basis, they will do that. And that's what we're doing. 30 years ago, the average holding period for stocks in the U.S. was 7 years. Today, it's less than 5 months. Now, investing is putting money in a company in the hopes that it will build up real value. It's not really putting money in a company and then watching which way the herd is moving so that you can quickly get out in front of the mass psychology. That's trading, that's not investing. And our economy, capitalism, has been hacked in part because of the influx of trading values at the expense of investing values. Sorry to be long-winded, but didn't expect you to ask that.